Welcome to the Talent Equation Podcast. If you are passionate about helping young people to unleash their potential and want to find ways to do that better, then you've come to the right place. The Talent Equation Podcast seeks to answer the important questions facing parents, coaches, and talent developers as they try to help young people become the best they can be. This is a series of unscripted, unpolished conversations between people at the razor's edge of the talent community who are prepared to share their knowledge, experiences, and challenges in an effort to help others get better faster. Listen, reflect, and don't forget to join the discussion at thetalentequation.co.uk. Enjoy the show.
Welcome everybody back to the Talent Equation, another instalment of interesting random conversations with people who are at the coalface, to working hard with athletes and coaches, and I'm really pleased to be able to invite Nick Ruddock to the show. Nick, welcome.
Thank you very much for having me, Stuart. Appreciate it.
Great stuff. It's been a long time coming. I know we've been trying to get this one doing, but with your crazy schedule all over the world, it's been pretty challenging. Why don't you let everybody know what you're up to?
Okay. Well, first of all, really appreciate you having me on the podcast or inviting me on. I'm a big fan of the content, and I always listen to it in the car, and it puts me in a very reflective mood, and makes me think a lot about my own coaching and where gymnastics is, which I guess leads me into what I do. So I'm now essentially a consultant within the performance gymnastics community. I work with women's artistic gymnastics, which is your Olympic 4 apparatus, vault, bars, beam and floor. And I guess I came from a slightly different background to a lot of performance coaches. I was actually just a recreational gymnast myself. I did 2 hours a week, or up to 2 hours a week, for about 10 years until I was about 15 years old, and naturally progressed into coaching recreational gymnastics, and did that for a few years at a couple of different clubs down in Surrey. And, was fortunate enough to be mentored, or given the opportunity to be mentored by a high performance coach at that particular club, who took me under his wing, and every Saturday I spent a few hours with him working with the elite girls who were only sort of 9 to 11 years old at the time, for example. And I bit the bug into coaching, and obviously from there I've been able to do a lot of traveling, work with some fantastic coaches, and I guess to give you in a nutshell version, I travelled to the US when I was sort of 18, 19 years old to work with a couple of the world's leading coaches out there, and spent a few months out there with them. And fortunately, with the fast-tracked learning that I got out there, I was given some great opportunities when I came back to the UK, moving around with a couple of full-time coaching positions. And then in 2010, was employed by British Gymnastics, which is obviously the governing body in the UK, as the national coach for juniors. So that was my first sort of bigger role within high performance, and I did that for 4 years. My role there within British Gymnastics as a lead junior coach was to make sure that as many young athletes transition to represent Great Britain and hopefully win medals at the senior ranks. And just for the avoidance of doubt, a senior for a female gymnast is 16 years plus. So my role took me from anyone in the country that was in the high performance end of the spectrum, from the age of 15 down to about sort of 8 or 9 really. And that was a great role for me. I really enjoyed my time there with British Gymnastics, but all things come to an end. I felt like it was time to move on. I was working very closely with an athlete, Amy Tinkler, who probably yourself or some of your listeners will be familiar with. She won a bronze medal in Rio on the floor. And so I went on from British Gymnastics to work even closer with Amy as one of her personal coaches. And following that spell, then just moved into consulting, and since then I've been really fortunate to work with about a dozen or just over a dozen international federations, mostly within Europe, but also going out to the Australian Federation, Japan, and some continued work in the States still at a club level. And I spend my time working on education. I run a number of different conferences and events throughout the year that attract several hundred people, and I've got a handful of clients as well. So it's a pretty diverse role within gymnastics, and I guess on the back of that, I've been fortunate enough to work with some great professional sports teams within Premier League football and rugby as well. That cross-pollination of ideas with I guess technical methodology and skill acquisition, certainly physical preparation as well, and how that transitions over to a number of different team sports as well. So that's what I'm doing at the minute to keep me busy.
I bet it is. But I mean, in some respects, really diverse and constantly varied life, which is, in many ways is kind of one of those things that sort of, I suppose, keeps you really sharp and means that you have to stay completely on your toes in terms of staying at the edge of what's going on in the world of talent and coaching and all that sort of stuff.
Yeah, I think so. And ultimately, I keep reminding people that when I'm traveling all around the world, I mean, I might do 4, sometimes 5 different countries in a month. And people think that's always me going out to educate others. But the reality is, like, for me to be exposed to that number of high-performing environments within such a short space of time, I'm learning so much as I'm there. I'm speaking to huge numbers of high-performing coaches and athletes and seeing different systems and environments and models. And for me, that's the fun part. And I just love learning. I really do. It's a lifelong passion, and I think the more environments that coaches can expose themselves to, then obviously the more rapid their own development is going to be. So it works in my favour as much as it does my clients. So I'm quite happy with that.
So in terms of your your learning journey, particularly into the performance environment, as you say, it's probably quite an atypical journey. I mean, ordinarily the scenario is ex-elite athlete sort of decides, right, I'm retiring now, what's next? Coaching, that looks interesting.
Yeah.
I'll have a go at that. And they have to go from a term I heard recently, they have to go from selfish as the athlete to selfless as the coach. And I think many of them really struggle with that transition. So, would you say that your journey is probably, whilst it's atypical, perhaps it's the sort of journey that more coaches should be given, I would have said.
Yeah, I think so. Mine certainly wasn't a typical transition, if you like. I mean, it was by accident that I got into coaching, really. I'd actually left the sport completely, and I was at college studying to be a computer programmer. It wasn't until a friend of mine that was within my recreational training class, who had also started coaching, just knocked on my door one day and said, "Do you fancy coming down for a job?" And I gave it a go, and I just think, destiny pulls you forwards like a magnet, and that was just obviously meant to be for me. And I'm a big believer that there's so many opportunities out there, and if you've got the right mindset, then you're going to be able to pursue them. Certainly within the British system, I just think there's an abundance of opportunity for coaches to develop, but they've just got to have the will and the desire to do it. Now, gymnastics for me just fit really, really well. I loved being in the gym. I had no expectation of teaching high-level gymnastics when I first started, because I never came from that background, and I certainly wasn't burnt out with gymnastics, because a lot of high-level gymnasts are spending 25 to 30 hours a week in the gym. For me, I was there a maximum 1 to 2 hours. So I was quite happy to spend another 20, 25 hours a week coaching in that environment, because it didn't feel like I'd been in there too much. And, I just couldn't get enough of it. I was in the gym constantly. And for sure, I was fortunate to have some mentors that perhaps saw some ability in me, or some potential. But I just think there is an abundance of opportunity for people, as long as they want to go out there and get it.
So just talk me through that bit, actually, because I think that's kind of a unique scenario. I mean, you mentioned at 18, 19, you went out to the States and worked with some, pretty high profile individuals.
Yeah.
How did that come about?
Interesting, really. So it was coinciding with the Athens Olympics, so 2004, and again at this stage I hadn't really had much involvement at all within high level gymnastics. There was some elite groups within the club that I was working, but they weren't particularly, they weren't challenging at international level by any means, or even a national squad level. But the USA team in Athens really inspired me. It was my first time watching the Olympics, and I just thought, that is amazing. I want to know more about that. And the only thing I could think of at the time was to jump onto Google and just start Googling any club in the US that had a member of the USA national team in their club. So I spent a couple of hours doing it. I must have fired off sort of 15, 16 emails to different clubs, basically saying, can I come over for a month? I don't want to be paid. I'll do it completely voluntarily, but I just want to learn. And again, by a stroke of luck, I guess, I came across a guy in the States who was very high up within the USA gymnastics hierarchy. And he responded and simply said, look, Nick, really appreciate your email. I'm not actually actively coaching, but I can forward your email to all the coaches that actually have athletes on the national team, if you would like me to do so. So, of course, I said yes. And from that, I had 3 or 4 responses, all saying, we'd love to have you over. But there was one person in particular, his name's Al Fong. He's a great mentor and friend of mine now. And, he was really interested in me, and he wanted to know exactly what I was looking to get out of coaching gymnastics, what I wanted to get out of the trip. And we just seemed to connect, even if it was just over email. And I guess that was it, really. We went backwards and forwards of emails for a little bit. I took out a pretty hefty loan from the bank at that age. I guess it was about £8,000. And I went to the US for a month, and I just started off by watching. And then it further developed into me kind of helping him out. And at the end of that, he actually offered me a coaching position to go back with him full time, which unfortunately fell through because I didn't have the credentials or couldn't get the visa. But in a nutshell, that's what happened. I went over there completely voluntarily. And since then, what was that? That's 12 years ago now, roughly. And we've developed a great friendship. He's an incredible mentor of mine, but he's also opened me up to other high-level coaches who I've been able to access. So Al Fung himself had 2 members of the Athens team who won silver medals, as being part of the silver medal winning team for USA. But he introduced me to Valery Lukin, who's now the head national coach of the USA team, and who is the father and coach of the Beijing Olympic medalist Nastia Lukin. And he was another mentor of mine. I did the same thing the following year and went back for a month just voluntarily. And he also took me under his wing and gave me the keys to his gym and said, here you go, you can stay here for a month. And I think being able to rub shoulders with people of that caliber that have walked the journey that you want to go on, and essentially I didn't leave their sides for 2 months, sort of back to back, and I was fortunate enough to go back every single year since then, and still do, to try and stay at the razor's edge of gymnastics, or at least where it's heading. So yeah,
fantastic. I mean, the reason I'm interested in that stuff, I'm always interested in kind of people's journeys, because it's rarely is it a kind of a straightforward one. I mean, most people, when they enter the coaching community, and I've been doing this last weekend, just doing a coach education course, and most people start, they get some sort of a qualification, and then they move up, and then maybe get the next qualification, this, that, and the other, and I think what's sort of been lost to kind of development is what you might call that kind of apprenticeship model, and that's kind of what you did, really. The master and apprentice type approach.
Yeah, and experiential learning. I mean, I've always said that coaching courses are they're necessary, and they're formalities. They tick the boxes. However, you don't become a high performing coach by attending a series of courses. It's just through your experience in the gym. Gymnastics gym in my case, but also just your experience working with and in different environments with different people. I think that's what really molds your philosophies, or at least fast tracks you. Because I think, certainly within gymnastics, you're spending 25, 30, 35 hours within your 4 walls, and it doesn't take long before your creativity just gets killed. And you've got to get out of those environments as often as you can. Even if it's your home environment, you've got to get out of it. Because as soon as you get in that pattern of just seeing the same people, seeing the same philosophies, seeing the same equipment, having the same discussions, you just lose that important part of creativity, which is driving high performance. And that's the beauty of what I do now, being able to travel extensively. I know that not all club coaches are able to do that, but my advice is often to people, just even if it's not a club within your sport, just travel down the road. It could be diving, it could be rugby. I've spent time with canoeing, just watching, and went to see. I might have some contacts within this industry, but it's been really good seeing British cycling and watching how they train. And there's always 2 or 3 things at least that you can take and adapt to your own environment, and just that different stimulus, I think, which is what we all need for our continuous professional development.
And I think that the point you make is, and I'm always fascinated by this. So, I mean, the point is, I mean, you've had exposure to, mentors, and which I think is an invaluable source of guidance for anybody who's looking to try and, become better at their craft in any walk of life, but certainly in the coaching, sort of learning from others, learning with others, learning alongside is a really powerful learning tool. And it's something that's a little bit overlooked, generally speaking, for me, as far as the coaching world is concerned. It's almost like, it's easy to see X number of people have attended a course, X number of people have passed a course. What that doesn't necessarily translate into is the knowledge that people have gained there, then translating that into practice. And a mentor can help you with that, because they're right there with you alongside when you make either a mistake or something along those lines, who can either pick you up or give you an alternative viewpoint. So it's sort of missed. But what I love about your story is your tenacity to go out there and search for knowledge. And, not many people would have gone, right, I'll get an £8,000 loan and go and work with somebody on the other side of the world. There's not many people do that. And I think that's testament to a level of dedication that is a valuable lesson for some people out there listening.
Yeah. I mean, thank you for that. And I think there's certainly a pattern from the coaches that I've seen within the gymnastics community, or certainly the British gymnastics community, the ones that have really fast-tracked their own development and gone from, a relatively newcomer to the world of coaching to a high-performing coach within a pretty, putting it into context, quite a short period of time. And they've all taken on a similar journey. They've all travelled abroad. They've all got mentors. They have attended the courses and the workshops as well, because they are valid. I think they're important to do that. But I always believe that if all you've got to do, if you want to be high performance, is just make a choice. And that's all it is. If you choose to go down that path, and then obviously you make sure that everything aligns with that and fits with that, then that's all you've got to do. But and you'll do anything that you can to make sure that happens, whether that is, reading a book, finding a mentor, picking up the phone to someone, because you've made that conscious decision and that's the path that you're going to go down. I'm not sure there's many coaches out there that have consciously actually thought about it in that way and really just commit to it 100%, because at the end of the day, and I know I'm preaching to the choir here and your audience as well, but it's just all about the decisions that we make and the clarity that we have on where we want to go and why. So there's certainly a pattern that I've seen emerging, and there's always the anomaly, the coach that does succeed without investing themselves in a lot of personal development. But how short-lived that is, I'm not sure. Yeah.
So I think probably worth just switching gears slightly. So one of the things that I've been you and I've sort of had conversations on Twitter over a number of periods of time, but of late, one of the things that really piqued my interest was a blog post you wrote about talent transfer. So probably just worth sharing with everybody the kind of the genesis of the post and the kind of where it came from and the sort of main narrative behind it, and then it'd be interesting just to maybe unpick a few bits within it.
Yeah, absolutely. So this blog, unsurprisingly, has had quite a lot of interest, and to be honest, they're the sort of blogs that I write. I don't write about things for the sake of it. I'll only write a blog if I think it's got some valid points. It's going to be the heart of good discussion, and this one hasn't failed to deliver on that front. The blog, and just to give a bit of context to people that are listening, the blog was basically about the question that if you have an athlete whose potential exceeds the competence of the coach, should that athlete transfer to a different environment in order to fulfill their potential? And I believe and it's not quite as black and white in this, but in most cases I believe yes is the answer to that. I wrote the blog because of the amount of travelling that I do and the number of different environments that I get into and the number of athletes that I come across. I'm always exposed to an enormous amount of talent because we've all got different understanding of what the word talent is, but let's just say it's, in this case, an athlete who has the package to be able to perform at a high level, for example. I know that's very, very basic, but let's say they're ticking those boxes. And it's very frustrating for me to see that there's countries or clubs, perhaps struggling to get into the medal ranks, despite their systems being, very, very good, and even the level of coaching very, very good in some cases, but they're struggling to get there because because some of these super, suitable athletes are actually working with coaches that don't have that competence. And I sometimes hear clubs and coaches telling me, oh, we don't have any talent, or, we're just not getting the right kids through the door. And it's just not the case. With a sport like gymnastics, there's talent everywhere. There really is talent everywhere. And I see it so much, and I just get frustrated with kids that have got enormous potential, not able to fulfill that potential. I just find that very frustrating. So that's why I wrote the blog post. That's the genesis of it, if you like, or the origin. Now, there's pros and cons to a talent transfer, and just to, go in a little bit deeper, the context was that the coach in question has no mentorship, has no personal development plan, has no history or track record of producing high-level gymnastics or performance sport in this case. And as therefore, you can pretty much predict that nothing's going to change in the future. They're non-self-aware, they're non-reflective, they've got a fixed mindset. And when you've got an athlete who has enormous potential working with a coach like that, it's almost a self-fulfilling prophecy that they're not going to fulfill their potential. Now, that's a travesty for a number of reasons, mostly because, that athlete hasn't had the opportunity to shine and to be exposed to the opportunities in life that a high-performing athlete would have. And it's not just about the competitions and potentially medals. It's the honour of representing your country, the ability to be able to travel the world, and all the different social benefits that come from that as well. What I believe is mostly the case, and not in all cases here, Stuart, but a lot of this is about ego-centred coaching. It's about being coach-centred rather than athlete-centred, and thinking more about the effect of losing that athlete and how that will impact yourself as a coach and your club, as opposed to what it can do to enhance the life of the person that you're working with. I do see both sides of the coin, and I understand a lot of people's arguments against this is, how can a coach develop themselves if they're constantly transferring their talent away to a different environment? And I think that is a very valid point. I understand it. However, in the context of the blog post, it was written about a coach that has no interest in necessarily exposing themselves to high performance environments or really pushing themselves to take themselves on that journey, just with the wish that they were going to get another athlete through the door, which is going to improve their results. And as we all know, 10 years of coaching, repeat, or 1 year of coaching repeated 10 times is not the same. It's very, very different to having experience and being reflective throughout that period of time, and to learn every single year for 10 years. And I think, being non-reflective and, just replicating your own program every single year and not changing is not going to help improve performance. It's certainly not going to fulfill the potential of the athlete.
So the response that you've had, what's been, and I think most of us who are writing in this space and kind of trying to change opinion and challenge existing viewpoints and things like that are coming up against this. So obviously, you stick your neck out, don't you? And you end up getting it shot off, or your head.
You have to put stick out, because we're trying to provoke change, and a lot of people don't like change. But that's the way that we're going to help move the program forwards. And essentially, if the blog post benefits one child, then it's been well written, and I would be happier about that than offending sort of maybe 10 coaches that don't like the context of it. So what's the response been like? What's the sort of pushback, if you like? I think a lot of people immediately blame the system. They blame the fact that governing bodies aren't maybe doing enough to help these coaches in these clubs from developing, which I totally disagree with personally. And I disagree with that probably because of the journey that I've taken. I don't believe it's the governing body's responsibility to upskill coaches to their full potential. It's impractical to expect a governing body to be able to do that. Like, the amount of resources, both financially and the human resources and the time involved in making sure that every coach fulfills their potential through, courses and workshops and so on, that's totally impractical. It's got to be a partnership affair, and coaches need to take responsibility for their own development. Like I said before, there's a huge abundance of opportunity within the British system and many other countries that I've been to as well to develop, because whether that's because we've got strong financial support in the UK. There's a huge amount of experts. There's a huge amount of resources, workshops, clinics, high-performing clubs. We really do have everything that we possibly need at our disposal to become high performance once you've consciously made that choice. So to blame the system, I think, is a bit of a cop-out, really. It's inconvenient for many people to pursue that path. I understand that. I'm very different, and I certainly was when I first travelled to America. It's all right for me at 18, 19 years old to take out a loan with fresh out of college, very few responsibilities, clearly didn't have a family, no mortgage, and no full-time position at the time that I couldn't get out of. It's easy for me to travel to the other side of the world and get mentorship and to develop those relationships. And it's not so easy for perhaps there's some of the superhero coaches that I believe are around, which is maybe a mum of two kids who's also got a full-time job and is juggling gymnastics coaching on top of that in their spare time, and it's what they might do as either a volunteer or just through passion. They might still get paid for it, but it's a passion of theirs. And I think they're the backbone of coaching in sport. However, that doesn't mean that they're then the right person to make sure that the athlete fulfills their potential. You've got professional full-time career coaches. And you've got, on the flip side of the coin, you've got coaches that are in the sport for all the right reasons. They're in it for the kids, they're in it for the passion, and they are the backbone of coaching. But that might not necessarily mean they're the right people to fulfil an athlete's high performance potential. And obviously, I'm talking about purely a high performance level here. So a lot of people just blaming the system and saying that other people aren't doing enough for them. That was one thing. One argument was, well, if that was the case, we'd send all our kids to America, because obviously the Americans at the minute are dominating within women's gymnastics. And again, it's a valid point. It's not a practical point, but I understand what those coaches are alluding to. Where do you draw the line between passing kids on to a higher performing club or country or coach? And I understand that point. Again, it's not entirely practical to do that, but again, in the context of the blog, we're talking about coaches that really have no desire or self-awareness to invest in their own personal development to make sure that kid does fulfill their potential. So let me just think about some other sort of hitbacks on this. Would be it might not necessarily be so transferring an athlete to a higher performing environment in terms of medal contention. That's one thing, but that environment might not necessarily be right for the kid from a social perspective. They're leaving their friends that they've already developed. They are comfortable in those environments. There's obviously an emotional attachment with the coaching team as well. And what if that move is counterproductive? It doesn't work. Again, very valid point. And I understand all these arguments. It's just a case of weighing up pros and cons, really understanding each scenario on an individual basis, and making sure that if a transition should go ahead, then it's absolutely the right thing to do.
I think given that context that the picture you paint, which is, this is a coach who is not interested in self-development, then in that context, I think you're absolutely right. I just want to pick up on a couple of points actually, because I think there's some interesting stuff in what you're saying there. I think you're absolutely right when you say that it's a cop out to blame the system, because you're right. In the sense that coaches who expect to be spoon-fed everything from the governing body or whatever it might be, that's they've got the wrong thinking entirely. And actually, yes, there is a definite individual desire, and there should be an individual desire for continuous improvement and learning. I definitely get that. I think, though, on the flip side, the bit that I think probably where I slightly differ from you is, in my experience working across the landscape, working in a number of governing bodies, I don't see, in general, and gymnastics might be different, but I don't see an appropriate level of investment. If you take all the investment across the whole sport, both in recreation and performance, I don't see generally an appropriate level of investment in coach development in order to meet the aspirations of that sport. So if the levels of investment in coaching and coach development were high enough, then I would be inclined to agree with you. But I still think there's a lot more room for organisations to be doing more to develop coaches.
And is there a particular area that you think those bodies should be developing the coaching?
Well, in particular, and this relates to stuff I do on a day-to-day basis, I think the bit that's sort of missing for me is high quality in situ coach development. So there's most coach education, coach development is based around knowledge acquisition through courses, and the assumption is then that knowledge acquisition turns into practice. And what we know is that actually very little, or relatively little, translates into practice. So and it's done that way because it's expedient and it's kind of it does a job and it's functional, but it's not the most effective way of turning or changing somebody's behavior. The best way to human beings are problem solving machines, and as a result we are best learning, as you did, in a live environment with somebody by your side helping make sense of what your lived experience is, or certainly in my opinion. And therefore I don't see enough investment in that kind of post-qualification support in situ. Most sports, in my opinion, just don't have that workforce.
Yeah, and if it's a case of again resources, workforce in that area, then I'm sure I can't doubt your experience and exposure to many more sports that I've probably had contact with as well. My concern with what I see certainly within gymnastics is that coaches are magnetised towards the wrong things. And this is partly most coaching courses within the world of gymnastics are technically focused. So it's about can you coach a double back somersault? Do you know what that looks like? Do you know what the methodology is, the skill development pathway? Now as well as I do, and I'm sure your listeners know, that the technical side of things is just one fraction of coaching, and certainly within high performance. But trying to get coaches along to not just suggesting it needs to be in a workshop kind of format, but trying to get them to invest more time in self-awareness and reflective practice and their communication skills and the way that they deliver their non-sexy topics, which are nowhere near as appealing as this is how you teach a double back somersault, which is much more interesting, but that's what's stopping coaches from really becoming high performance or high performing. And I get it all the time. I regularly, obviously, I do a lot, an awful lot of consulting, and whilst not much of it is in the UK because most of my clients are abroad, I still get approached a lot within clubs within the UK wanting me to sort of go in and essentially they ask, how much will it be, Nick, for you to come in and for a club visit? And I'll set out the parameters and say, look, I'm quite happy to come in under these conditions. I'm not running a training session for you. I'm much more useful at a strategic level, trying to help you with let's say your planning, the holistic view of your program, the delivery of your staff, and how all that's going through. I mean, I call it a high performance health check, and most clubs aren't interested in that. They just want me to go in and run a training session for them because that's what's interesting. And it's a real shame. And I think if more coaches understood that it's your soft skills, so to speak, that are actually gonna help you to become the best version of yourself as possible, and the best coach that you can possibly be, as opposed to the technical stuff, which is just available on YouTube and numerous subscription services now available online. We're drowning in information there, and we're starving of the knowledge of how we need to be as coaches and how to actually implement that information. So I would certainly say that's a bit of a struggle that we have in gymnastics. And
it's interesting, actually. That point is an interesting one, and there's certainly a lot of parallels with, I think, a number of other sports. I mean, I spent quite a long time working in golf, in sort of coaching and talent in the golf context, and I think it's exactly the same. I think you'd find the same. If your CPD content is around what I would describe as, say, the coaching craft, like helping people learn skill acquisition principles, all that sort of stuff, you wouldn't get very many people turning up. But if you do something where you get some sort of high profile coach of the number one golfer in the world or someone like that, then you're oversubscribed 3 times over, and largely it's because it's technical in nature. Yeah. And I think you're absolutely right. I think there is this general driver to the kind of the sexy stuff, because it's the assumption is that's the answer to athletic success, and the stuff around the becoming better as a facilitator of learning is definitely underrepresented. But again, I'm going to come back to this a point there around systematic aspect. I mean, to a certain extent, I question a lot of organisations around how much do they prize that? How much emphasis do they place on, let's call it the how to coach stuff?
Sure.
And again, in general, the how to coach stuff is not emphasised enough, either as part of a qualification or as as part of CPD. So, for example, if as part of your license or your membership or whatever it might be, you've got, the emphasis was placed more heavily through whether it's CPD points or whichever method, you want to adopt. If the emphasis is placed more there, then of course that attracts people in more ways. But again, I'll come back to this other point around the whole mentoring piece as well, because I think the best way maybe to help people with their craft is live. It's in the moment.
Yeah.
I mean, certainly within the sport I'm involved in as a coach educator, the focus on there has become much more on the craft of coaching than it has been on the what to coach stuff. But I think as a general rule, I do think fundamentally I agree with you. But I think, again, governing bodies can do more about this. They can put more emphasis on that.
Yeah, valid point for sure. And I guess one thing I missed earlier, I mean, for me, it's all well and good me saying this and, coaches don't do this, coaches don't do that. And, I'm very realistic about the fact that I was never involved with all this personal development stuff and self-reflection either. And it was only, due to the fact that I was exposed to, I was a part of the ECAP, UK Sport ECAP program, which is the elite coach apprentice program that 12 coaches from various different Olympic sports are able to go on as a cohort for a 2-year period. And that was within my role as a national coach for British Gymnastics. So I was really fortunate to be able to go on that journey. And, before going on that journey, on that cohort for 2 years, I didn't have the self-awareness or the understanding to even, recognise that I needed these skills either. So, I think I was one of the lucky ones that I was, I guess, sort of pushed into that direction. And that course, that ECAP program really helped, battle my ego. So, completely knocked my ego, which was exactly what I needed to do. And then the program builds you back up again, and it really makes you reflect and think about yourself as a coach and how you deliver. And if I'm honest, it took me about 4 years before a lot of it really sunk in and I started to understand some of the topics that we were talking about on there. But that was a fascinating 2 years and a really, good bit of self-discovery with a great cohort of coaches. So.
Brilliant. I mean, it's kind of great to hear that in lots of ways. I mean, so I think ECAP was the brainchild of a good friend and a mentor of mine, Graham Taylor, who was the head of coaching at UK Sport. And so it's fantastic to hear that, the impact that particular intervention had on you, and then, how that's then taken you further forward.
Yeah, and I think if you simply just look at the results of the coaches that have gone through those programs, I mean, it's phenomenal. It really is phenomenal. You've got Mel, just to name a few, Mel Marshall, who's Adam Peaty's coach, the Olympic champion swimmer. You've got Barry Colley, who was a colleague of mine and still is a national coach at British Gymnastics. One of the athletes that he works closely with, Niall Wilson, winning a bronze medal on the high bar at the Olympics, and I mean, just, you can go on and name countless medals in Rio and in London that have come through these coaches that have been on this program. So it's it's testimony to the quality of those workshops and courses. But none of that is technically focused. We don't touch on it at all in the 2 years. You couldn't really, because you've got swimming, working with gymnastics, working with diving, and Paralympic cycling, and it's just such a diverse mix of coaches. It will be very difficult to have anything too technically focused on there, and we just spend the time talking about these, the coaching craft, if you like, and self-discovery and self-awareness. So, really, really valuable stuff.
I think, again, interesting, and I think one of my frustrations, if I'm honest, and one of the reasons I set the Talent Equation up and set up the blog was because I sort of felt that certainly my journey as a coach of young people who are on a developmental journey, whether that's in a school environment, in a club environment, wherever it is. So you're right at the cutting edge. You've got these young adolescents who are kind of trying to make decisions about what they're going to do with the rest of their lives in sport and what have you. and just the lack of information available to people to be able to help do that. And again, often the challenge isn't a technical one or a physical one. The challenge is one of dealing with a human being and helping guide them on their to solve some sort of developmental problem. And the challenges of that, and I dread to think of some of the mistakes I made over the years. And I set this up all as much to help others to hopefully navigate some of those challenges. Your journey, you got to where you got to, and then I suppose almost like had a crash course in how to coach from ECAP. But so many others on that developmental journey kind of don't have that, and have to learn through bitter experience often.
Yeah, I totally agree. Like I said, I've been very fortunate to be able to, have great people mentor me and push me in the right direction. And working with, again, British Gymnastics, obviously it was in their best interest also to put me on a course like ECAP because of the the benefit to the athletes that I'll be working with and the coaches thereafter. So it was a mutual thing. But yes, it's not a typical journey, and I have been very fortunate in that. I certainly respect that. Definitely.
I think it's interesting though, because I think it's almost like that kind of principle of reciprocity. I mean, it's not just fortune, is it? I mean, you made a significant investment in yourself, driven by this idea of wanting to learn, wanting to improve, wanting to get better, wanting to do a better job with your athletes. And then as a result of that, you get a position which then facilitates further learning. So it's not entirely fortunate, is it? It's almost like a payback for the commitment.
Yeah. Like I said before, I think you make your own choices and you create your own path. And I'm just a real believer in being a creator of circumstance, not a victim of circumstance. And I think it's by traveling the world and seeing the different systems, sporting systems, I've really realised how fortunate we are. I mean, obviously we're here in Great Britain, and we do have an abundance of opportunity. Okay, albeit it's not perfect. There are gaps. There are greater opportunities. But if you go to Finland, for example, or you go to an Israel, two countries that I've worked with as well, and you see the resources that they've got available to them, and and it's just non-comparable. And we got to grab that. We've just got to grab that opportunity and appreciate that everything that we need is around us if we've got the right mindset and the right approach, and just got to make those choices.
Do you think you sort of touched on something there? I'm one of these people who, you talk about Athens. We won a sprinkling of gold medals at Athens, but that was the first time we started to see the lottery investment bearing fruit, really. Prior to that, I remember Atlanta, where we got one bronze. And I'm not really used to our success at international sport. It still doesn't quite sit that comfortably with me, But one thing I think is I kind of sometimes wonder whether we actually, given our resources, we're actually underachieving. And I have a suspicion, and I'd be interested just to get your views on this. It's a hypothesis, a theory, that where we are underachieving is in talent development. Now, I would say that, wouldn't I? But I'd be interested to get your thoughts.
I don't disagree, actually. I think we are in danger of overcomplicating things. Some of the nations that I go to, when I look at their talent pool, what they've chosen, or perhaps what they've left with, I look at it and I go, God, geez, we wouldn't be able to cope with this in Great Britain. Or they're not the sort of athletes that we would select, I should say. And then I go back sort of 4 or 5 years later, and those same athletes are doing really well. And I think, wow, you know what? These countries they're making the most out of what they've got, and that's coaching. At the end of the day, it's fulfilling the potential of the athlete in front of you. And I think some of these other nations are using, to borrow the phrase from Rasmus Ankerson, they're using talent that whispers, and we are looking a lot for talent that screams. And in gymnastics, we're our own worst enemy. We're selecting kids down a performance pathway, and these kids are as young as 7, 8 years old. And I don't have to talk to you about the challenges that we're facing with that and all the problems that come with selecting kids so young, but that is the nature of the sport. And I think perhaps we need to to have maybe a smaller nation mindset, to think, we need to be valuing every single child that we have, and, trying to make sure that our talent pool stays as big as possible, rather than just choosing the talent that screams and working with that straight away. So I would agree with what you're saying there, absolutely, 100%. I think we could be doing more to be more inclusive as opposed to exclusive, and there are a few nations that can really have a very exclusive system, I think, and be successful. Due to the fact that we're still not a massive nation really in size. I mean, look at if you look at obviously the Americans, for example, they've got a huge number of athletes to choose from, and therefore their system is actually built entirely differently in the way that ours will operate. But we need to get the balance right, and we need to make sure we're nurturing every single athlete that does have potential, and not just potential at 8 years old, but the ones that are going to come through that a little bit later. I say that a little bit later because in gymnastics, there is going to be a cut-off point, and for me to say that at 10 years old it might be too late might run shivers down the spines of some of the listeners. But the reality is, unfortunately, we are an early specialisation sport, not through choice but through necessity, I would say, and maybe that's controversial as well, but that's what I believe.
I take your point. I could rant a lot about gymnastics, but the reality is, like you say, the competition rules are the competition rules, and ostensibly, under 18s compete internationally, and therefore that naturally starts the ball rolling earlier and earlier. I think, though, one of the differences with gymnastics is everyone's got their eyes open from the outset. There's no secrets here. If you're a parent and you've got a young child who's interested in gymnastics and shows some potential at it, it's a really, really hard road, and you are going to have to make a decision about whether that's the journey that you need to take with that young person. It's not like other sports, for example, where often, young people are sold a dream with very, very little chance. And I suppose, just let me flick something else out there as well. I think one of the other things about gymnastics is, I think if it's handled well and it's managed well, I think the byproducts of gymnastics are extremely potentially beneficial, in the sense that, fundamentally, I think it's one of those. If you have high levels of gymnastic ability, it translates into so many other sports. So, for example, if you don't quite get where you think you're getting to in gymnastics, you've got huge opportunities for transfer into other domains that you wouldn't have in elsewhere. And we see that, don't we? Pole vault and all these sorts of other things. So Absolutely. It's not like it's a completely wasted investment in time. And the other side of it as well, I think some of the discipline that comes with being a gymnast and the dedication required also, I think, sets young people up with a valuable set of kind of principles by which to live their life by, and the dedication that comes with that, I think, is really valuable as well. Now, that's not to say you don't get that from other sports, but I do think there's something in gymnastics about that. Having said all of that, if I could have my magic wand, I would say that you're not allowed to compete in gymnastics until you're 18, like most other sports, and then that would change the dynamic slightly, but that's just me.
Yes. That's probably
a different debate for a different day, maybe.
That's what I was going to say. Where do we start with that one? That's a whole other topic. But maybe that's podcast number 2.
Definitely podcast number 2. Just flicking us full circle back to the talent transfer context. When I first read your blog and I read talent transfer, I was expecting to read something slightly different, because the common conception of, or the sort of common vernacular of talent transfer is this idea of, I'm a gymnast, I'll become a pole vaulter. And UK sport themselves have, they've experimented with that and have got some examples of positive responses. Lizzie Armistead in skeleton, I think she transferred from athletics, things like that. So there are sports where there's some good transferability to be had. And I think actually they often talk about donor sports and kind of receiver sports. And I think gymnastics has the potential to be the engine room of Britain's future sporting success as a donor sport in lots of ways into other sports. And that's sort of the talent transfer concept. So what you were talking about was more of a transfer within the system, the transfer of talent from one coach to the next or from one environment to the next.
That's right.
And I think the benefit here potentially is, and I think maybe where your blog may have had some of its biggest impact, is that raising the awareness of parents, and this is one of the things that this podcast also seeks to do, is to raise the awareness of parents around what does a good environment look like? Because most parents don't actually know. They don't know what good coaching is. Now, they've gone somewhere, and as an individual who, to all intents and purposes, is doing a great job with their young person, and they don't know the difference between what that coach provides and what somebody else provides until they're exposed to it, or someone comes along and says, your child should be somewhere else. And I think if we can raise the awareness of parents around what really good coaching looks like, then they'd start to make more informed decisions about where their children should be.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know whether you think there's mileage in that or not.
No, I do. I think, I feel for parents, I really do, because, they're often held at arm's length. But, if I was a parent and I was sending my daughter to another sport, I'd really want to be, very aware of the track record, if you like, the welfare of the club and all these other areas. But that's difficult information to get. There's not many clubs and coaches that open their doors to be, answering all those questions or have that sort of interrogation. But, I absolutely agree. I think, that is a very valid point that you raised there. And parents are in a difficult situation, and they simply don't know. They don't know what they don't know. That's where it becomes tricky. They have no context of what a gymnast at 5 years old, 6 years old, 15-year-old, should be able to do, or what that journey even looks like. And essentially, to some degree, I feel for a lot of the coaches as well. People are only being the best that they know how to be. No one walks around intentionally being a bad coach. I'm sure there's maybe one in a million that do, but let's be honest, everyone's trying to be the best version of themselves, and then most coaches want to be the best coach that they can possibly be as well. So it's I think there's just a responsibility for everybody to demonstrate leadership, to try and educate people, and I think education is the main point here. And I guess that was another point actually of the blog. It was promoting a mentorship program. So let's say, for example, there was a young athlete who was 10 years old. She's been identified as having some great ability and great potential. She transfers to another club, which isn't too far from her. And in return for that transfer, not that it's a transactional thing, but a benefit for the original coach would be that they would get mentorship and education from either the new club or from the governing body. So it becomes almost an incentive program. It's it's a thank you. We really appreciate you. Allowing your athlete to move on to hopefully fulfill their potential, and as a reward for that, as a thank you, but also to help you in the future if you're in this situation. We're going to offer you some program and some mentorship and exposure to maybe a high performance mentor or new environments. And I think that was one of the points that I was really trying to get through on the blog, is that we can do more for each other as opposed to just thinking about being ruthless. I'm certainly not talking about poaching. That's definitely not the way that I wanted the blog to come across at all. To try and encourage, parents just to be picking up the phone left, right, and centre to different clubs, or other clubs ringing up parents from other clubs, and that's absolutely not what I'm trying to encourage whatsoever. It's more the education behind it, and the self-awareness as opposed to being maybe egocentric.
I think you're right, because I think I think the point is that I don't think enough's done to recognise the valuable contribution that coach has made. UK Coaching do something interesting every year. They do the UK Coaching Awards. I don't know if you've ever been along to that. They do actually a really nice thing. They call it. They make an award and they call it the Coaching Chain. And this is usually nominated by an athlete. And last year it was Kay Richardson Walsh, who'd obviously been the captain of the hockey team. And what she did was they basically gave an award to all the coaches that had helped her on her journey, right down to the school coach who introduced her to the game in the first place, right up to Danny Kerry, who was her, obviously her gold medal winning coach, and a couple of other coaches in between. And it was a really nice recognition. And I think that's done annually, but to one set of coaches. And I think more sports should do that recognition piece for the coaches who have, made a valuable contribution, because they've done quite a lot of the hard yards. I mean, I remember Istvan Bayi, who was the kind of the father of the long-term athlete development model back in the day. He talked about that in the Eastern Bloc, and I know the Eastern Bloc did an awful lot of very, very negative things, but I think one thing they did do interestingly well was they used to pay the club coaches more than the national coach, because they were recognising the value that those club coaches had, and almost saying that their job was harder because the national coach, most of the work is done, so to speak. And that's kind of an interesting shift of reward structure.
Yeah, having been a personal coach and a national coach, I would agree. The club coaches are doing the hard graft. They're the ones, in the gym, let's say, day in, day out, and it's relatively easy for a national coach to travel around the country to different clubs and pointing out people's weaknesses. So I completely agree with that. No, it sounds fantastic. Is that UK coaching?
Yeah, UK coaching do that. Yeah, it's nice.
Brilliant. Yeah, absolutely brilliant. Because you're right. It's the original club coach, if you like, has put that athlete in a position that they can move forwards. They've been a critical part of that journey, and they should be, maybe rewarded for that. I think it's brilliant.
And that point as well of you make as well, that when they recognise that they kind of have reached the point where, and let's face it, deep down inside, they probably know they've reached that point where they probably can't take this athlete any further. And to be, self-aware enough to say, right, I'm holding my hand up here. I've got something here that I think needs a bit of further help. The other thing I just thought might be worth mentioning as well within the blog is I thought often most sports tend to adopt this transfer system where the assumption is that the coach at the national level is a better coach and then the individual locally. Now, sometimes that isn't always the case, for the right, because sometimes people get to national level coaching roles or regional level coaching roles, and it's not always because necessarily they're the best at what they do, but they may have, hooked onto a good athlete, and then So what I'm trying to say is it's not always the best thing. But one of the things I think is interesting is that somebody described to me is you've got the transfer system, or you could use what they call the escort system, where our coach can go on the journey, kind of a club level can go on the journey with their athlete, but with the so they're going into these different environments, but they're still part of the process, so that they're, again, as you say, they're learning as they're going. Now, in the example you gave, this individual may or may not be interested in that, but I think more organizations perhaps ought to think about allowing the club coach to come on the journey and recognizing the valuable support, because I bet they've got some really good insight about what makes this athlete tick from a motivational perspective, their foibles, their hang-ups, their challenges, the parental dynamics, all these sorts of things that are really valuable for that athlete as they're going along the journey, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and I think also it's important to remember that coach might be in the situation again 12 months later. They might have an equally or more talented athlete, and it's quite self-defeating, if you like, to continually just hand your kids over, so to someone else, and that again isn't the nature of what I would think would be best practice. But if like you said, this is kind of like a buddy system where they they go on that journey, maybe they get upskilled on that journey, so the next time they have an athlete of that caliber, they're able to take them perhaps only a little bit further, or perhaps they can take them throughout that whole journey. But that coach still needs to feel like they're making progress, because progress at the end of the day is happiness, and if the coach doesn't feel like they're progressing, then they're going to be in trouble, which is not what we want either.
Brilliant. Well, look, yeah, we've been going for 57 minutes, so where did all that time go?
Exactly. No, it's great. Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Listen, hey, keep going. Keep doing what you're doing in terms of I know it's hard to write the blogs. I haven't written one for a while, and the life gets in the way and all that sort of stuff. But I think it definitely was a great read from my perspective, and it stimulated a lot of interest. And I shared, as you know, I shared it with my audience as well. So as much as that, keep going. And in a couple of months' time, when you've been out there and found something new out, by all means, it'd be great to come back and share with me what you've learned in the last few months.
Love to. Thank
Brilliant
you very
stuff,
much.
Nick. Thanks very much.
Thanks, Joe. Take care.